Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Kris Spinelli on the podcast. She's a women's physique competitor coming to us all the way from New York, as I like to pronounce it. I've been there a couple of times, but hopefully she has better weather than me, but we'll figure that out soon enough. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Kris, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm excited to do this.
Well, like I mentioned before, and I ask this every single time for my first question, what is the weather like in New York today?
Today it's sunny for the first time in about a week. It's rained probably every day straight up till today. So,
I'm lucky here. It's 88 degrees basically, and it's sunny out, which is nice. It's gonna be like 90s all week, which I'm not that fond of because I don't really like the warm weather so much. But hey, beggars can't be choosers. But before we depress everyone that's living in colder climates about our great summers that we're having, why don't you give us your backstory first off on what really inspired and motivated you to first of all get in shape and how that led to you deciding to give bodybuilding a try?
well, I started doing gymnastics at a very young age, probably like 7 or 8. I was very competitive, competed all the way through high school, was on a Division 1 gymnastics team. But when I was young, my father at age 12 got me started with working out, just preventative to not get injured. And so that's how it all started. And I actually hated going to the gym. It was all Nautilus. Um, so that dates me right there. So that's how it started. He forced me to go. I hated it. I did start reading all the muscle and fitness magazines when I was about, 12, 13, 14. Always wanted to be a bodybuilder. I was doing the gymnastics thing. About 17, I started lifting free weights with my sister, she did a show. And then I was in college doing, gymnastics. We had to work out for the team. We had morning workouts. We had after practice workouts. I really never thought I wanted to compete because of the diet. I was genetically very gifted. I could eat donuts and still have a six pack. I know. Well, that all changed, after about 30 years old, that changed. Um, and when I was 45, my daughter, somebody at the gym had said, you should do a show. And I was like, I don't know. My daughter was like, Mom, just do it. Do it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't ever want to wish that I did something and have not done it. I'm like, so I'll do one. I'll do one show, see how it goes. The first time on stage, I was hooked. I was hooked. So that was about 5 years ago. So 5, 6 years ago. So now I've been competing for 6 years.
That I love why I hear that every single time with almost every guest that I've had on. It's always, oh, I'll just give it a shot and see what happens, and then they just automatically fall in love with it. But I do, the moment that you mentioned Nautilus, I was like, oh my god. One time I was working out downstairs in our basement that we have down here, and my dad walked past and he's like, you have no idea how lucky you have it that you didn't grow up with like just Nautilus stuff like that. And I was like, hey, I believe you and stuff like that. So yeah, anytime someone mentions Nautilus, I always think about that one time that my dad warned me. He's like, you guys are so lucky now this day and age that you didn't have that. But yeah, that's awesome. And what about the sport really got you hooked as soon as you tried it?
That first time being on stage, I guess, with gymnastics, you're used to being on whichever piece of equipment alone. Um, for me, I just have such a competitive nature that once I stepped on stage and got to do it was physique. I never did bikini or I'd already been lifting for, 35 years before I competed. So I went right to physique. Doing the routine, it hooked me. I was hooked. I loved it. I loved the whole prep, seeing your body change, day to day, week to week, everything about it.
Yeah, just everything about this sport. And plus, you really need to enjoy all those things because so many people, they just get into it for the wrong reasons. They just say, oh, just because I want to win. And then they don't realize that there's so much more to the sport than, like I was telling you before, the general public just thinks, oh, you just work out a lot and you learn how to pose really. And it's like, well, there's so much more to that. But being that you are a gymnast, anyone that really has an athletic background, I'd say tends to have, more, you already start off looking better basically than the average public or than the average person that starts off bodybuilding, because we've had both where some people, they start off, just literally never trained ever, but then the athletes have sort of a greater advantage. Do you think that you had that being a gymnast? And plus, being a gymnast too, you're already muscular to begin with, even though you did start competing way after you were done doing gymnastics.
I was always very muscular as a gymnast. to the point where the judges would tend to mark me down because I didn't have the long, thin lines. I always had the big muscular legs, the bigger shoulders and back. Um, it's just, I always loved the conditioning end of it, doing all the pull ups and push ups. And so it just kind of, it all just clicked. And then when we started, weight training, um, I was hooked. I was never going to not work out. Now it's just finding new things to stay motivated after 38 years now of lifting, you know?
What are some ways that you do stay motivated after all that lifting? Because I mean, I've only been doing this for what, 7 years really. I've been working out seriously, and I cannot imagine 30 years from now, like, well, I can imagine doing it, but like just the thought of like, how am I still going to keep myself motivated?
Well, being a competitor with bodybuilding, now there's always something that needs to be bigger or better or more cut, more defined, thicker. So there's always something to reach towards. That and I love lifting heavy. So trying to go heavier and heavier. I honestly was to the point where when I did get my pro card, if I didn't get it, I was gonna then switch to powerlifting. So that didn't happen. I got my pro card, so then I just stayed with bodybuilding.
Were you just thinking though deep down, you're like, oh my god, I can finally eat a lot more stuff now, and I can finally just put on some weight, and then you got your pro card, and you're like, okay, fine, I got to put on the back burner because we've had some bodybuilders that turn to powerlifting. They're like, oh my god, my stomach thanks me more than anything. But I mean, on top of that, also, I mean, I love to talk genetics on this podcast because so many people do not understand. And let's be honest, everyone's on social media where people just do not get though, oh my god, I want to look just like her, I want to look just like him, and it's like, no, you cannot look like that person just because even if you work out the same way that they do, you're not going to get those same results. But on top of that, whenever someone first gets started working out, they always have that one body part that really really takes off. They don't have to train as much, and they have that one body part that just legs behind it. They have to train to oblivion to get to catch up. I mean, everyone who's listening to this knows that my back took off and my legs were the one that struggled for me. But what were those body parts for you when you first got started working out?
Um, I would say my back and my triceps, and I think it's just all goes back to the gymnastics, the amount of pull-ups that we did every single day, and dips. So now my triceps are pretty large. My back has always been big. I've always thought it was big. Now I'm just still trying to make it bigger, to get that better X. But it's always been very defined. It's probably like my most defined body part, even in off season.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought up triceps because every guy that I know of, oh my god, I want bigger arms, I want better arms. I almost have to shake them down and be like, triceps, dude. It's like 75% of your arm. If you have bigger triceps, you can lack a little bit in the bicep department and still look like you have great arms. So if there's any piece of advice that anyone takes from this podcast, especially all the gym bros out there that might be listening to this, you have to train your triceps because it is so much more important. I'm glad that you brought it up. And what was one body part that you also struggled with?
Once I switched to bodybuilding, I would say legs. My bottom half is where I tend to carry most of my fat, and water. And I always thought I had big legs, so I never wanted to squat. So I really would just stick to doing extensions and curls, until I started getting into bodybuilding. And now I'm like, God, all those years of really not doing legs. I wish I would have been doing legs so they would be more developed, but they're coming along. We've been really busting with them, and they're getting there.
Well, I'm glad that you said legs because that makes me feel better. Every single time I have a guest that says legs really took off for them, I'm almost just like, screw you, get off my podcast. I don't want to talk to you because but again, I'm 6'3", so at least I have a little bit of an excuse where I'm like, okay, you're too much of a lengthy person anyway to begin with for me. But I mean, especially when you get into this lifestyle, this is so much more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey. And so many people do not understand that. What was that mental adjustment like for you getting into the sport? Because as I've told many people, if you can complete a prep, I mean, you can really accomplish anything just because of that mental fortitude that it requires.
I really thought with gymnastics that I was very mentally tough because it's a mentally demanding sport as well. But it's so different when you're in prep. Off season's easy because I still stick to the diet, but you're on way more food. But I'm a teacher, so when I have to start doing fasted cardio, it's at 3:30 in the morning. So to get up at 3:30 and start doing fasted, and then get ready, be at school at 6:45 in the morning, and then deal with teenagers all day because I teach high school.
Good God.
um yeah. So it can be rough mentally, and then to still have to go to the gym and train and then do cardio again. um you got to be very focused. So
Just to give a little comparison, I was in bed at 3:30 last night, okay? So you're getting up and doing your cardio when I'm going to sleep. So
only
that
when I'm prepping, though. Only when I'm prepping, not now.
yeah, I was gonna say, well, hopefully not. I mean, hopefully you can give yourself a little break during the summertime. But I mean, yeah, just that. I mean, that whole mental journey. And how do you deal with that during prep, being a teacher as well? Because I've had about a dozen or so competitors that are also teachers, and that to me just seems like the most insane profession to have when you're competing.
I love it. You have to love it. And I mean, even without competing, you have to love teaching. I love working with teenagers. I really don't have an issue with any of the kids in the high school. Um, they're all pretty respectful to me. Not, most gym teachers don't look,
Well, when you look like that, I mean, the kids are going to be respectful. Let's be honest; they're not going to be, mouthing off too
yeah.
much and stuff like that. So there's a bonus to that. But what are the reactions that you get, like especially as you get ready for a show and stuff? Are people just coming up to you and asking you questions constantly?
Um, well, they don't understand how I could lose, 20, 30 pounds in 4 months. So there's a lot of questions about diet and what do you do to train abs, and so I get a lot of those questions. They do ask me about shows. um, they want to go watch one, but now it's to the point where there's really not many pro shows in New York State, so I'm traveling. So
Have any of the athletic teams asked you to like be their personal trainer for the team or anything?
no, we have our own, like, our school has hired a personal trainer that comes in and just does all the strength and conditioning for every sports team. So it's every team's using like the same format and all that, and they have the same person. So um
You're a good backup plan then, at least.
I guess I don't know if they can afford me.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah, let's be totally honest. But yeah, that is awesome. And I mean, getting into this lifestyle too. I mean, prep is just a whole different beast. Where I would have never guessed in a million years that is one of the hardest things for these competitors. Just because just as soon as you turn that light switch on to prep, really, I mean, you just become so laser focused with your diet, with the working out, with the sleep, just with everything has to become so specific. What was that like for you when you first experienced that? And has prep gotten easier for you to get through as your career's gone on?
Yeah, I would say each prep gets a little bit easier. The first one, was drastic because I've never had to, you know, get up that early to do cardio. The earliest I was up in college was at 6 a.m. for runs. You know what I mean? And that was 20 minutes. Um, so that was difficult. And then just you start to feel crappy once you start to get lean. That's how you know you're getting lean. You don't feel very good. And it's hard to put on a smile with teenagers every day, um, while you're doing that.
I mean, it's hard enough even without going on that diet and going through a prep to put on a smile for some of these teachers with with some of these kids. So, hey, more kudos to you as it is. But I mean, nutrition is by far so undervalued, especially on social media, where people just don't understand that. Yeah, like you said, you can have that metabolism where you can still have like great abs up until you're like 30, and then it starts to. Which I'm 27, so I'm going to enjoy my last few years of having a somewhat decent metabolism. But so many people do not understand that nutrition is 80 to 90% of the changes that you're going to have. What were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you made when you started to get into this sport?
Well, I had to give up cheese, Swiss cheese. Uh, just love it. I used to always have it in my fridge. It's not there anymore. Um, I used to always have beer in my fridge. No beer, and I don't even miss it. Don't even miss it. But I always, I'd like to have a cold beer when I was mowing the lawn. But so I don't do that anymore. Sweets, I still will, here and there have to get those in. But the biggest things, I would say the cheese for sure.
So do you at least allow yourself cheese for like a post-show meal or anything like that?
I don't even crave cheese. I never crave cheese. Maybe pizza, with cheese on it. But
Well, I'm gonna have a quesadilla tonight, and I'm just gonna be thinking about you when I have it. Then just be like, okay, I'm gonna do this in honor for all the ones that have lost their craving for cheese. But yeah, I mean, just that dedication that you have in that sport that's the one thing that I think impresses me more than anything else. Is just because, like I've told you before, I've tried it. I never was gonna compete, but I just went in prep as solidarity, and I barely lasted 3 weeks, and that just really to me is like, okay, this is so much more than just working out and posing. But on top of that, I mean, let's be 100% honest, the hardest thing that I've heard from, the vast amount of these competitors I've had on the podcast is that posing for them is the hardest thing. I mean, whether it comes down to your diet or nutrition or working out, I mean, posing generally is, at the top of the mountain when it comes to the hard things for people. And I compare it now to being a perfect driver. You can be a great driver, you can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser, you can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
Posing's hard because even trying to find the time to pose when you're prepping, because you're already so focused, and my day is so regimented that I may not even get to pose until 8, 9 o'clock at night, and I would rather go to bed. But in the off season, I find it very difficult to pose when I'm on the fluffier side. I hate to see myself without lines, and feeling like a piece of sausage in a bikini. It's not my favorite, but you got to do it. It has to be done. But it's definitely been, I would say, one of my weaknesses, for up till now. So
And out of your physique poses, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
I would say favorite pose is a back double bicep. Least favorite pose, I would have to say probably ab and thigh.
Yep. And that's, yeah, ab and thigh. That's the one that we hear of most often. It's the least favorite, just because I mean it's such an unnatural pose, and it's hard to make it look, flowy and stuff like that with everything else. Just because, yeah, that's the one thing that if they could change anything about posing for me, at least, I'd say that that's the one thing that they could do. And like I tell almost everyone that's on your back pose. I mean that'll be my favorite pose, just because that's where I can put my smile down. And that's, most people don't understand
Yeah,
that your jaw muscles are going to be some of the most sore things after these shows, just because the human body is not meant to be in a pose for that long. It's also not meant to be smiling that long. And that's another thing that I think so many people struggle with, is that your body just needs to be so conditioned to be able to be flexed for that huge amount of time that they usually have you on stage. And how long did it take you to really develop, you think, that, muscle maturity, that you were able to do that? Because if you were to take someone from the general public and have them go on stage and pose, I mean, they're going to last probably about 1% of the amount of time that a bodybuilder can last. And it's just a learned skill.
it really is. I've had like clients that want to do bodybuilding, and I'll work on posing with them, and they can't believe, like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. I'm like, I know. It's in the amount that you sweat while you're posing. It's you would never think that it's that much work, but it really, really is. Learning how to squeeze everything and having that mind muscle connection. It's tough. It's
And
tough.
I mean, on top of the posing that has to go in, and everything else, I mean, there's so much more to the sport. But when you're walking up on that stage, what is that feeling like for you when you just all of a sudden kind of get that realization that, all this hard work that I put into this look, I'm finally going to be able to get on stage and show it off? What is that feeling like for you?
It's an amazing feeling because I mean, for me, I tend to prep longer. I usually will do anywhere 16 to 20 weeks. Last year was even longer with this, my first show that I wanted to do got canceled. Um, I was lucky because I know I didn't probably prep as long as many people did with the amount of shows that got canceled. But last summer was probably 24, 25 weeks. That's 6 months. Um, so once you do finally get to get on stage, it's just an amazing feeling that you finally made it there, and that you're able to do it, and it's just best feeling in the world on stage.
Yeah, and is it? I mean, kind of because like gymnastics is sort of a solo sport too, even though you do compete in teams. Is it someone like that feeling? Because as someone that's never competed in an individual sport, I've always done team sports where I've never really understood that. Is it somewhat similar to that, where you just have to be so in? I don't know. It's not self-centered, but everything does depend on you, really.
Yeah, I'm used to that, because everything always has depended on me, but it's like that, but intensified because you have that bright light shining, in your eyes where you can't see anything in the audience, and then makes it even hotter, and you're sweating, and so it's like,
I mean, these people are already depleted enough as is, and you're making them sweat up on there. And yeah, that's another thing with me too. Just that show day look is just, yeah, that's just so insane that people are able to, do that. But when they announced your name and you realize, oh my God, I won my pro card, what was that feeling like? Because for so many people, they don't understand that the highlight of a lot of these guest careers is winning their pro card, just because that is the affirmation that, you can compete in pro shows now, and just all that hard work is paid off.
it was an amazing feeling. I mean, there's no feeling like it ever. I guess you could probably compare it to, making it to the Olympics right now, because the Olympics are going on. It's got to be very similar to being the same. It's a huge accomplishment that not everyone can do. Um, a lot of people, don't ever even get to experience that. Um, it's got to be one of the best days of my life, to be honest.
And that's great. And I mean, and it's just so well deserved. And one thing that I also have to talk about on this podcast is another myth that needs to be dispelled is that so many people do not understand that that look that you present on stage is not going to be, 24/7 able to be achieved because I mean, so many times on Instagram, people, obviously you're going to save pictures and then you're going to post them throughout the year like a lot of people do. But a lot of people just don't understand that, yeah, you can't look like that. Some people try to maintain that look and then it ends up, impacting their careers because it's not a healthy look. You're not your healthiest when you're on that stage. But what was that like for you when you first realized that, oh my God, this look that I've, worked so hard on, I'm not going to be able to maintain it? And has it gotten easier for you to accept that as your career's gone on?
I don't think that will ever get easier for me. Especially being, with my experience of being with gymnastics and that's a very weight based and how you look. It's and just to give you an example, last year on stage, I was probably 123 pounds, and I got up to 170. Right now, I'm at 155. So
And
that's
how tall are you?
I'm 5'1".
Okay, yeah, so I'm 6'3" and I'm like 200. So she got almost close to me and she's a full foot and 2 inches shorter, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a huge, it's huge mentally to try to keep it together when you're that heavy, but you have to, it's got to be done just so that you can put on more size. With being 120 pounds on stage and I'm 5'1", I'm going against girls that could be 6 feet tall. They're shredded at 160, 170. I just look tiny. So just got to get bigger.
And that's, yeah, I mean, I've always found that it's funny that, I mean, in general, female bodybuilders and bodybuilders in general tend to be on the shorter side. But yeah, every once in a while we get a 6-footer on the podcast. And I'm just like, first of all, how are you able to do that? And because I've always said to like, yeah, if you were talking and we had like a 6 foot tall person posed next to you, it looks like a completely different person or a completely different human being, really. So it's kind of really hard to judge that. But I mean, let's be honest, this whole last year with coronavirus, it was just a cluster. How did you deal with that as a competitor and as a teacher? Because I mean, when they closed gyms down, I was just like, okay, this is going to be an interesting podcast for the next couple of months with all these competitors that I don't normally have on. But how did you deal with all that, and how are you think you still dealing with that? Because I mean, as much as things have opened back up and stuff like that, there are still some lingering things going on. But overall, what was your experience like over this last year of it?
Well, I'm in New York State, so everything locked up real quick. Everything got got shut down real fast. I kind of had a feeling it was going to happen. So I would say probably about 4 or 5 days before that, I went to a fitness place and bought a squat rack, and I already had a bench. I already have a treadmill and a bike. So we worked out for probably 2 months in my basement. And then, we found some underground gyms where we could go and work out, and nobody knew they were open. So then I was able to train there, which I mean, a lot more options as far as exercises to do. But we did a lot of band training and, a lot of very basic lifts and, constantly trying to think of new things. With school, I was like, woohoo! Now I can spend more time working out. Um, and I was able to get a lot more sleep, which, is
Oh,
huge for recovery.
oh my God, yeah, yeah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir on that. And what was it like being, a Phi Ed teacher during the pandemic? Because it's like you're not gonna be able to like really assign the kids homework and stuff like that. So how did they manage all that?
Well, so I teach high school phys ed, and kids were doing, they would exercise on their own, and then they would have to fill out a ditto basically and email it to me. And I have, 250 students. I'd have to go through a few times a week and check off each kid individually and then go and input them in. And a lot of kids just didn't want to do anything, um, you know, which it happens, even regularly, but it seemed to happen even more last year. So,
I can't blame it. I always found that interesting because I have other friends that teach, and I was just like, what? I wonder what the Phi Ed teachers are doing there because it's like, how are you going to enforce? So yeah, that's fascinating. And we finally got the answer now, where we had them fill out stuff, and yeah, that must have just been just. I couldn't imagine what it would be like, especially as a teacher, just because just how much more impacted your profession was than a lot of the other professions that were impacted as well. But I mean, you mentioned it before, and it's the most important thing in this lifestyle. I don't care what anyone says is sleep, and anyone that disagrees with me, I always tell them go pull an all nighter and then go and try to work out and tell me how that works out for you. But what is your relationship with sleep been like ever since you became a bodybuilder? Because unfortunately, the moment that you get into bodybuilding, a lot of people struggle with sleep, especially because with cardio. I mean, it becomes a lot more of a valued commodity than before you started competing.
Yeah, I've always been a good sleeper. I've always been able to sleep in the car. Um, I can fall asleep like, in about 30 seconds. When it gets to be the hardest, probably the last 5, 6 weeks of prep, I'll start taking melatonin, and that usually helps me with getting to sleep. So, other than that, I really don't struggle with, getting sleep.
Are you a late sleeper or can you function off of like low hours of sleep? Because we've had some of those genetic freaks on the podcast where they go like 4 hours and they're good to go. And I was like, okay, you're unbelievable.
No, yeah, I need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Otherwise, I'm not a very happy person. So,
Oh my god. Well, yeah, and that's even before bodybuilding too for me as well. So I couldn't imagine if I was, shredding down what that would be like for me as well. But I mean, another thing I mentioned before, I mean, cardio, let's just be honest, that is the bane of my existence. I hate it more than life itself. And when I say cardio, I mean like actual running. I could go on walks for forever and that doesn't bother me at all. But what is your relationship like with cardio? Because I know you did cardio before when you were in college and, probably throughout your journey. But I mean, when you get into bodybuilding, it just becomes so much harder and like you literally have to do it. So what has your experience been like with the cardio? Because unfortunately, I mean, once you get into this lifestyle, you have to sign a deal with the devil with that.
yep, yep. I like to run. I have a love hate relationship with running. I do it like right now. I even do it in off season. Um, I like to do it as hit. Where I'll sprint for a minute and then jog or walk for a minute or two and then sprint again. Um, that way, it's a little bit easier mentally to get through it. So no matter what kind of cardio I do, I like to do hit. It's just easier mentally for me, at least.
I am not a hit guy. I mean, I'm sort of like the tortoise where I mean I can go slow and steady the whole for however long I want. But yeah, when it comes to that hit stuff, I have not been blessed with that. So that's why if I ever raced, it would have to be like a long distance thing because eventually I'd catch up to everyone just because I'd be able to keep the same pace. But that is just intense. And I mean, one of the training techniques that I love to talk about on this podcast too, because it's not talked about as much as it should be. And I've preached about its benefits because it was one of those things in high school that I started and it really's done wonders is time under tension. Do you like to do a lot of that in your training?
Yeah. We've actually started to really slow down a lot of my reps. I was, I'm actually starting to get like super strong where it's kind of scary. And I've already had one shoulder surgery. So, and I'm about to be 51. So we're trying to like, stay away from injuries. So we do try to lighten my weights a little bit and, do a lot slower reps. And it's actually when I do start to go heavy after that, I'm way stronger, way stronger. So,
Well,
um,
she's 51 and looks like that. I don't know if there's any other endorsement for the sport of bodybuilding that really anyone needs. But you mentioned that you are very strong. What are some of your best lifts that you've done?
um, just about a week and a half ago, I benched 275 for 2 reps. It was my first time I've ever tried that. My boyfriend is my trainer, and he really, especially after my shoulder surgery, never really allows me to go heavy. So I got all excited, and I couldn't believe he was actually going to let me try that. But it's on my Instagram. It's up there. Squatting. I think the most I've done is 365 for 5 or 6 reps. Um, he won't let me go any heavier than that because of I have some lower back issues from gymnastics, and
I mean, every ex gymnast that I've talked to has had something with their lower back or their back in general. So I don't know if that's just a thing. With 275 being 5'1" and at 51 years, that's just that is just absolutely insane. And that is absolutely awesome. Was bench always something that you were really good at, even from a young age?
yeah. I was able to bench my weight probably in high school, so um, it's always been, and probably it's due to all the push-ups from gymnastics. You know,
Well, thank God you said that you'd always been good at it because I was like, if she just, never really started training chest or bench and then she just pulls that off, I'd just be like, okay, yeah, this is just absolutely insane. But I mean, like, let's be honest, you're not the average looking 51-year-old woman. If you were to walk out in public dressed the way that you are right now, I mean, you are going to get a lot of people's attention just because it's human nature when you see something that's not of their normal, where they're just like, oh wow, that's interesting. what has this whole bodybuilding experience been like for you in that regard? Because I mean, yeah, you sort of become like a mini celebrity, and a lot of people, I mean, they just cope with that in various ways.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that people say to me is more about my tattoos than my muscles. Like, oh, I like your tattoo, or wow, you have a lot of tattoos. I'm like, really? That's what you see is just the tattoos? But okay, cool. Not a lot of people really say very much about the muscles, at least around here.
Well, yeah, I mean that's got its positive too. Well, you did mention tattoos. What does the tattoo on your shoulder mean?
So it's a full sleeve,
Oh, okay.
and it's actually a breast cancer ribbon, and then just all black roses, black and gray roses. My whole mother's side of the family has had breast cancer. So my mom, two of my aunts, and my grandmother. So before I started bodybuilding, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go get a tattoo to support for breast cancer, and it was just something I really wanted.
That is that is great. And one thing that I've been fascinated with, especially with tattoos and bodybuilding, have you ever heard any feedback that it might like diminish your score at all, or do judges not normally place that in there? Because I've always been fascinated by that. Because like some people with tattoos, you literally can't see some of their muscles just because of that. But have you gotten any feedback like that, or is generally with tattoos they just really don't care?
I have never gotten any feedback about the tattoos. I think for me, the way my tattoo is, once I get the tan put on, it's you don't really see it as much. So I think depending on where it is and what it is and how dark it is, um, but I have slowed down on getting tattoos. Like I've gotten new tattoos, but I try to not get them anywhere where it's going to cover muscle. At least until I'm done competing. So I try to hold off on that. But
I mean, I've never gotten a tattoo myself. I might get like one on like my heel or something like that eventually, but just yeah, I have some friends that went way out on it, and then they come to regret it. And I'm just like, yeah, well, I'll just be rather more, I'll just wait and see. But yeah, I eventually I will probably, yeah, like more than likely I will get one eventually, but just a waiting process. And then yeah,
it's got to be something that you're really passionate about,
I mean, and yeah, and I've had friends too that have drunkenly gotten ones that they look at the very next day, even, and they're like, "Oh my god, I've made a really bad mistake" and stuff like that. So yeah, you got to be of first of all, you got to be of sound mind when you get it to happen to you. If that's anything that I
Yeah,
could give advice to people on too, make sure that you're not inebriated and just saying, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna get a tattoo that says." Some stupid word or whatever like that on it that has no meaning to me. Make sure that it has meaning to you and that you're not under the influence when you're going to get it. That's the best piece of advice that I could, really give everyone. But being that you also, I mean, you're a PE teacher, so you work with a lot of people on, health and fitness goals. If someone were to walk up to you and say, I made the decision, I wanted to, get in better shape and really adapt a healthy and fit lifestyle, what's the best piece of overall advice that you would give them? Just because, I mean, let's be completely honest, everyone's body is different. So one piece of advice that you give to someone, it's not going to work for anyone else. But in general, what advice would you like to give someone who just to have them get started? Because I found that for so many people, just taking that first step into the gym, I mean, you are so unlikely to walk out of there without getting a workout in.
yeah. I would say consistency is probably the number one most important thing, whether you're talking about diet or working out, whether you're talking about training with weights or with cardio. You have to be consistent. If you're not consistent, it's not going to do anything. And when I teach, I do teach in the fitness center for high school. And my biggest thing for the last 20 years with all of my high school girls is I want you to feel comfortable walking into a gym where you do not have to ask a single man what to do. I want you to feel confident and I want you to know what you should be doing and how it should be done. So, for me, that's probably the most important thing for me for women. So I just want them to know what to do and how to do it correctly without getting injured.
That's half the battle right then and there is knowing, what to do and what not to do. Where I mean, and I know at least every guy that I've known has struggled with that, especially getting started, because most guys are a little bit, when they get started, they're at that younger phase where they feel like they can do anything and that they do some stupid maneuvers. I've even done it myself. I'm not gonna lie, everyone. Being in high school, I did some stupid lifts where I would never do that today, and yeah, it's a miracle that I wasn't really severely injured. But yeah, that is a big thing too, as well as making sure that you do things properly. And yeah, I cannot tell you enough how happy I am that you said that, because yeah, a lot of people, they just go in full Rambo for 2 weeks and they say, oh, I'm going to work out 3 hours a day, and then they do everything in their own way, and then next thing you know, hey, my back is all messed up or my shoulder's messed up, I can't work out. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, that's why you don't go in there and just do whatever you want without a set plan or anything. But If we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding journey? Where would you like to just be at in your overall life? What are some goals that you would like to have achieved?
Um, well, I don't ever foresee me stopping competing. I really don't think that age really is affecting me with what I do. At least at this point, I would say in a year from right now, I'll be prepping for at least one show for next year. This year I took off. I had some work done in my house, and traveling for shows is it gets expensive. So I've had a bunch of work done in my house. So I didn't compete this year, and I just wanted to put some size on. So hopefully in the next year, just putting on a little more size, and then getting super lean to do whatever show we pick to do.
What's one area that you think that you put on the most size on this last year?
I That's a tough one. I've been going real hard with back, shoulders, and legs, doing each of those twice a week. Um, I would probably say that it's hard. I'd probably say my back has probably gotten the biggest. Um, but I feel like with women's physique, can your back really be too big? You always want that. You always want that X. So we're looking to make that X bigger.
Well, now being that you are also an ex gymnast, I have to ask, what is your record for pull ups? Because anytime I have a gymnast on, I was like, okay, they can do more pull ups than me.
It's funny because I have contests usually at school. Like boys will come up to me and be like, "I bet I can do more pull-ups than you." I'll be like, "Okay, you go first." Um, well, at this weight, I could probably do about 20. Um, but usually, whatever boy wants to compete with me at school, I usually make sure I at least get one more than they do. So,
I mean, I could probably max out at 15. So yeah, you definitely got me beat in that department. But I would also get killed in the comments down below if I didn't ask. I mean, shoulders are one area for women that I think they struggle with the most that I've heard of a million times. And as we can see, you do have great shoulders. So what does a shoulder day look like for you? Because I can guarantee there'll be comments down below if I didn't ask you, being like, "Ask why didn't you ask her what she did for shoulders? I've been trying everything all throughout my life to try to get them." But what does a shoulder workout look like for you?
um, we do a lot of, presses, whether it's seated on a machine or standing, or seated with dumbbells with a barbell. We use every variation, even cable presses, a lot of lateral raises, a lot of front raises, upright rows, a lot of bent over rear delts, rear delts with cables, just lots of different variations, slow reps, drop sets, all of it, half reps.
Well, and I also have to add too. I mean, there's three parts to the shoulder too, which a lot of people don't get. And then they always say, "Oh, I'm going to trace shoulders," and I go, "Oh, what part?" And then they just go, "Oh, the shoulder part." And I was like, "Okay." Then I just sit them down for like a minute and then just really brief them on that. But yeah, there's just and plus, the one thing that I would give advice to is that you got to train them more than once a week if you really want them to get them grow, and that goes for any body part too. Really, I mean, we have so many people who are just like, "Oh, why aren't my legs growing when I train them? Once every week or once every 2 weeks." And it's like, well, because you need to train them more. That's a big thing as well. But if someone were to also come up to you and say, "Kris, we made the decision. You can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, and everyone would go along with it," would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. What would I like to see changed? Um, that's a tough question. I don't know. I love the sport. I guess I would say, um, to not have the women get so big. You know what I mean? I'm just seeing more and more girls just getting huge. And I originally got my pro card in bodybuilding, but I didn't want to get as big as what a lot of the girls are, especially being at 5'1". Um, I didn't want to put my body through that. Um, so I just kind of wish that we didn't have to get so big.
Yeah, you do not want to be 140, 150 pounds of muscle at 5'1". That is just, first of all, just walking in and of itself is going to be hard for you, and just fully functioning. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they are getting a little bit too big, and and that's coming from a guy who's interviewed over 200, or I think actually like close to 300 of them. And yeah, I mean, it's going to impact them later on in life too. So I always tell them, it's just, yeah, you just gotta, and with bodybuilding too, I mean, they gotta tone it down a little bit, and that goes for men too. I mean, it's like, geez, and even in the news recently of like all these guests that have, or all these competitors that are dying now and stuff like that. Like even the last week alone, there's two of them that I know of that passed away, including one yesterday, I think. And it's just like, yeah, it's just, yeah, you got to take things a little bit easier too as well. But again, Kris, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your journey and talking with us. And I really, really appreciate it. And is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
I guess probably my boyfriend, who's really helped me progress through since I've gotten my pro card, he's really helped push me. He's there every single day, pushing me in the gym and outside of the gym, pushing me to, make sure I get my cardio in and make sure I get meals in. So I would say probably him and my kids.
And that is awesome. And I mean, lastly, how have you, because I was going to mention it anyway, how have you managed to, so first of all, you're a teacher, you're a mom, and you're a bodybuilder. What is your time management like? I know you said it's very specific, but like, do you literally have to have every minute down pat? Because even two of those three things, I would say your time management almost has to be nearly impossible. But having all three of them, you must just be like so focused, laser focused at all times, basically.
I have to be. I'm a single mom too. So, my daughter's 20, so I don't have to worry so much about her anymore. But my son is 11. So even especially with all this COVID stuff and him being home while I'm at work, and it's been tough. It's been tough. You have to, completely stay focused. And I am totally a planner. I can't have things thrown at me and expect to appear at them. Every day is planned. Pretty much every minute of the day of my days are planned. So
Which I mean, I get to enjoy the childless portion of my life where I literally can just do whatever I want whenever I want, which is nice. But hey, I it's still something that I really want to have eventually, is have kids. And yeah, they just add so much more to your life, and it's just doing all three of those things. It's just that adds even so much more respect for me to you, just because that is just, yeah. I mean, I even can't even doing one of those things even at a time. I might be like, okay, yeah, this is gonna be rough, even if it was just the teaching or just being a parent. That's so more and more kudos to you. But again, Kris, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your journey. I really appreciate it.
thank you. Thanks for having me. I really had a good time.
Absolutely. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.